Hey guys, welcome back to another video of Stay Financially Woke. I hope everyone's having a great summer wherever you are. I've had a really busy month of June, so I apologize I have not posted in a while. I was just doing some work for an online class, trying to get that in before the due date, and just some work around the house. Last video we talked about our savings, right? And how we can minimize those wants, to get a bigger surplus at the end of the month, right? To build up our savings. And we also went into, what goes into our savings, investments, our emergency fund, stuff like that. Before getting into investments, because that's later down the road, our next step into becoming financially woke, right, is understanding what our emergency fund is and how we can kind of build that up. We're going to call it the EF in this program, okay, the EF. We're separating this into two videos. First video today, I'm just going to be answering some questions. What exactly is an EF, and why, as young adults, whether you're single or have a family, why we should be building that up now, okay? So, first question, what is an EF? What goes into your emergency fund? People say, financial advisors and anyone you ask who is, I guess, financially secure with themselves, they always say you should start off with at least 6 months of costs, right? In case something happens, you lose your job, something comes up, you have to move, you have to relocate. 6 months of costs. And when people think of costs, when they start calculating out 6 months, they're like, oh geez, that's a lot of money. If you really look at it though, if you take out those wants that we talked about in the last video, right? If you take out those wants, your EF should only be your needs, right? That 6 months of funds should only cover the costs that you need to survive, your basic essential needs. Putting a roof over your head, your car, you're making a car payment, groceries, food, whatever, utilities. That is what should go into your EF. No recreational costs, no wants, none of those costs. Only your needs, okay? So that's around, depending on, it's going to be different for everyone, right? Different cost of living in each state, different financial situation. If you have a family, it's going to be a little bit larger to save up, but hopefully you have that other person to kind of build off of too, so you can both be putting away money for that EF. That should be about 6 months. And next question, how much should go into an EF? Everything that you have left over after paying all those costs for the needs, right? Everything you have left, that surplus that we talked about in the last video, that should be going into your EF. If you do not have this emergency fund yet, you should be just feeding those funds, feeding that fund, that EF, with everything you have left. You should not be. The next video I make is going to go into this. This is opinion based. Some people say, oh, I think you got to be investing too. But my personal opinion, put everything into that EF before you invest. Okay. So that's after you have paid everything, your utilities, every need for that month. You should be building up that EF. Next question, where do I store my EF? Now this is really important, and we'll be going into sort of the next video, we'll be covering this as well. Your EF fund, that amount of money for that 6 months, should be stored in an account that is easily accessible. And that's kind of the most essential part, easily accessible, because you need to have access to that money in case anything happens, right? Now, that could be, if you have online banking, I really encourage everyone to have access to online banking. Most banks let you switch over at no cost. I know Bank of America has an excellent online banking program, regardless if you have an app or not. Some people will will build up that emergency fund in a checking account. I do not advise that, because if you have a large sum in that checking account, that's going to be very tempting to spend, rather than having that large sum of money in a savings account that is not connected to a card. I'm going to say that one more time. It is a lot more likely that you will be spending that money if you have that in a checking account that is connected to a debit card, rather than having that in a savings account that is not connected to a card. My savings account, I do not have a card for that. But the reason why I encourage people to store that into a savings account in online banking instead of having in a broker, right, or an investment portfolio, is because those portfolios usually take 3 to 5 business days to withdraw from. Usually with an online banking system, it's less than a day. You transfer the funds, sometimes it's within the next hour, because it's in the same institution, it's in the same or credit union, right? Transferring from one account to another that's both under your name in the same institution, it should take no less than a day. So that's kind of like the big reason why I encourage people to keep it in an online banking that is connected to your checking account. So in case something happens, you get in an accident, you have to move quickly, or you have a medical bill to pay, instead of putting on that credit card, you have that emergency fund that you've been saving up for this. It's almost just like insurance, right? You have that money just to quickly transfer from that savings to that checking account. Next question. Why is the EF relevant to young adults now in this day, in this year, 2021, right? Coming from 2020, right? I think we, as young adults, we learned, and everyone, I say young adults because I'm speaking for myself, we learned a big lesson through the pandemic, right? I know it affected a lot of businesses, affected pretty much the majority of America, as far as, even people that were financially secure, and, there were still people losing their jobs and going through hardships. As far as like what I witnessed with friends, with acquaintances, coworkers, I saw that as a whole, I think the young adults did not really have a good understanding of why they needed to build an EF, right? They were just thinking maybe, a couple hundred here or there, maybe 1,000 should be fine. But you really have to think about the what ifs. You have to think about the worst case scenario. And that's exactly what an EF is. It's a worst case scenario account, right? You're not touching it unless you have been hit with that worst case scenario, right? So, seeing all these, a lot of these workers, regardless what you're doing as a profession, going through the pandemic, a lot of them did not have a solid emergency fund. And they could have, right? They're going on these vacations throughout the year. They are, spending, it's okay to spend on recreational things, but you should always have that cushion to fall back on in case something happens. And, before the pandemic, everyone was thinking, I think the last one was like SARS or something back. And that I don't think that really affected America that much. But I'm trying to think of the last big pandemic. People don't really realize that could happen again, right? And now that we've faced COVID, I think people have really learned. I'm hoping people have learned their lesson that, you know, we really need to have that financial cushion to fall back on in case a pandemic or, you know, some, you know, the market crashes, something like that. It's always good to have that kind of peace of mind to know, okay, I'm fine in case a pandemic happens, I lose my job, I get in an accident, something like that. Next one, why should we be storing money when we're actively working, right? And how does that help our credit utilization? Okay, and this is kind of a big deal. Credit utilization is going to be a whole nother topic, but for this, there's kind of been this whole mindset about, you know, these larger corporations and the government and the institutions. They're, you know, I guess they're kind of like hogging our money. That's kind of like a bandwagon mindset that a lot of Americans are kind of thinking about these days, is that, oh, it's all these large corporations' fault, or these institutions, they're making billions of dollars, and they're not really thinking about, I guess, the lower Americans, you know, who are struggling to get by. But that's because these people who are struggling to get by, they're not thinking about their finances, right? They're not actually taking thought. You know, they're not stopping to think, all right, we're spending all this money on things that we don't really need, wants, right? And they're not really thinking about the what ifs, those what if scenarios. So then when these what if scenarios do happen, who do they blame it on? The government, these large corporations, these institutions. Oh, they're not giving us money. They're not giving us our stimulus check. Oh, you know, they're not paying for this debt that I have. You have to think about these costs before they happen, right? And having an EF, that it starts with having an EF, and having that cushion, that financial cushion to fall back on, is almost like sticking it to the man, right? You're not having to rely on those credit unions or those corporations to take out loans, to use your credit card, you know, more than you need to. That's sticking it to the man, right? You're not using them. They're not gaining interest from you. People don't realize that becoming financially secure means not relying on those huge, those money-making corporations. And that's why they're making so much money, is because there's so many Americans in debt and so many Americans that are being taken advantage by these organizations. And Americans, just like you had the option to stop that, but it's really not, I guess, an important topic for them, apparently. And then when those situations do happen, whose fault is it? It's not their fault, it's the government's fault. So that's kind of a sticky issue, I guess. Stimulus checks. The next stimulus check, right? In case, you know, something happens and the government wants to give us another round of stimulus checks, right? I saw this happening a lot. People were, and sadly this happened with many of my friends, they were, you know, saying, oh, I can't wait for this next round of stimulus checks. I can't wait for this money to go through, or did your money go through? Mine hasn't. And then when they get this money, what do they do with it? They don't use the money to stimulate their finances, right? Or their savings, right? They just spend it on this. You know, there's all these jokes about people spending it on just worthless items, and sadly, it's not really a joke. It's because it's actually happening. That's why they call it a stimulus fund, because they're trying to stimulate the market by allowing these people to get a little bit more financially secure with themselves during this pandemic. right? You're essentially wasting the government's money if you need that money, and then when you get that money, you just waste it on something that is not really needed in your life. Does that make sense? Last one, like I said before, how does the credit card utilization kind of tag in with having an emergency fund? The credit utilization, we're going to get deeper into that, but having an EF allows you to kind of stray away from using that credit card so much. If you need new tires, if you need to, replace your AC, build a fence, anything that requires a larger sum of money, right? Instead of putting that on your credit card, which a lot of people do, and paying that off and raising, right? You're essentially paying that off, but because of that interest, you're paying more, and that's going to bing your credit score, right? Because you're using probably more than 30%, more than 50%, because you put that large sum on that credit card. Having that EF readily available, not in a broker, not in any investment accounts, but in a savings account, that will allow you to quickly use that, to quickly transfer that money instead of using the credit card. And again, sticking it to the man, you're not using those credit card, or you're not borrowing money from those institutions, right? And they're not getting all that interest. That's why these institutions are doing so well. That's why people are so salty that they have billions of dollars, because they're literally giving them money by paying interest on these credit cards. And they're taking advantage of these people because they keep offering them, these good deals. We'll make your card a metal card, but you have to pay this much interest if you buy this plane ticket. Credit cards are just a scam. Having a solid EF will allow you to keep that credit card utilization, that percentage, under like 10%. I try to keep mine under 5%. People say keep it under 10%, but bullshit, right? All right, so yeah, having that EF will really allow you to just skip over all that credit card interest and just unnecessary costs that you would be paying if you did put on a credit card. All right, so second video is going to be very, very controversial, I guess you could say. A lot of people think that you should be investing before building up that EF. I say that's a bunch of crap, because, we'll get into that video for the next time. Don't fall asleep, America. Stay financially woke.